Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Judaism and Recovery. Our class in God of Understanding, we're now holding in this 19th class, and we're reading chapter 16, The Stubborn and Rebellious Son. In this section, we are discussing the concept of codependence, and in this specific chapter, we're going to do a Bible study. We study a section of the Bible that tells us a story about the rebellious son, and we're going to try to read it with a lens of addiction and recovery, and see what we can come up with. Now, this is a thought put forth by the author, Rabbi Shais Taub, whom I respect, and he's a great Torah scholar and a great thinker, but it's Rabbi Taub's thoughts. So it doesn't mean that I endorse them or I disagree with them, and I'm just presenting them the way in the book, and then we can think about them whichever way we like. A lot of you will think that maybe this topic is not directly relevant to your lives, and even if it's relevant to your lives because you fit the description, it doesn't necessarily mean that we mean you. This is just a study of a piece of the Torah, and see if we can apply it in the way we treat addiction and recovery in family dynamics. So you can turn to page 140 actually. We'll start reading directly from the verses of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, verses 18, 19, 20, and 21. If a man will have a stubborn and rebellious son, who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they chastened him, will not listen to them, then his father and his mother will seize him and bring him to the elders of his city and to the gate of his place. And they will say to the elders of his city, "This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard." Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death. So shall you remove the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Very biblical. And definitely not politically correct. Got stoning in it and everything. But if we can withhold the knee-jerk reaction to the perceived brutality of the story, we can learn much here. The first time I read this chapter, I was like blown away. So, pretty interesting stuff. First, it's very interesting that the sages say that this scenario is actually put forth as a purely hypothetical case. According to one opinion, the Torah is not describing here something that would ever actually happen. Rather, it is outlining a theoretical scenario for presenting a didactic model. As the Talmud says, the story is taught not for practical purposes, according to the opinion, if it's not meant to happen, but so that we may study it and reap reward. The Talmud says that according to this opinion, the conditions for this to actually happen are impossible to all occur in the same family. So therefore, not only it never happened, it's impossible to even occur just from all the requirements. I'll give you an example. It says that the father and the mother have to have the same voice. So either the mother has a male voice, or the father has a female voice. But in another part, the Talmud says that if the father or the mother had a disability that made them not able to talk normally, then discipline applies. So either if they have this deformity, they can't be those parents. If they don't have the deformity, they can't be the parents either. So the Talmud says this is an example of why this case is technically impossible. So therefore, the Talmud asks the question, why is it then written in the Torah? And the Talmud answers, for the sole purpose of us learning a lesson from it. Now, we assume that the lesson is, don't be a drunkard and don't be a glutton. But really, it has a deeper lesson, especially for the dynamics of the family. In other words, the law calling for the execution of the stubborn and rebellious son was never intended to be carried out. Indeed, the Talmud clear that the detailed legal parameter that determine who is a stubborn and rebellious is actually so complex it would be, for all practical purposes, impossible for all necessary criteria to ever be met. The story is meant to serve as an illustration of certain principle or archetype where disastrous consequences were pathetically played out to their terrible end, so that future generations may gain insight and hopefully learn how to put a stop to madness should rear its head in their families. So we're going to talk about a dysfunctional family, basically. And in any dysfunctional family, who's in charge of the dysfunctional family? Dysfunctional parents. So we're going to talk about dysfunctional parents. If you're a parent, yes, you did all those things. Like it or not. Even if your son is not an addict, even if your daughter is not an addict, even if your son or daughter are too young to even be addicts. If you're a parent, you did all those things. Because we're all humans, and as humans, we do not have the perfect way of being parents. And this is not a saying that we're bad parents when we do these things, but it talks about the extremes so that we understand what happens in the extremes. Let's take a closer look at the verse. It may surprise you, but the story doesn't begin with a stubborn and rebellious son. It begins with a father to whom there will be a son if a man will have a stubborn and rebellious son. It's easy detail to miss, but it makes all the difference in the world. The Torah tells us right away that the problem child is not really the main character in this drama. The father is. Sure, we'll think of this as a story about a stubborn, rebellious son, but it's really the story of a father. A father trying to raise his son. Usually, there'll be some drama in the addict's life that gets a family to admit that things are out of hand. But once the family does find help, it is almost instantly clear that the addict is not the only sick person, or even the sickest person in the family. It makes sense that the Torah doesn't really tell the story of a stubborn, rebellious son so much as the story of his parents. In fact, the son actually does nothing in the whole story. He says nothing, and he takes no action. The only thing the Torah actually tells us about him is that he doesn't listen to his parents. Now, we don't know why he doesn't listen to his parents yet. We just know he doesn't listen. Soon we'll understand why. He just can't. Apparently because his parents don't know how to talk to him. The rest of the details you only hear secondhand when his parents complain to the elders. The parents, not the son, are the principal actors in this narrative. It is they who enlist the aid of the elders. It is they who press the issue and bring the whole drama to its gruesome conclusion, stoning. Let's follow the story verse by verse and see what happens. Page 142. The first verse in this narrative tells us that the stubborn, rebellious son will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother. The word for obey or heed can actually be read as listen. So it means that he's not listening to his parents. But the same word could also be translated as hear. So he doesn't hear his parents. In other words, it's possible that this is a home where there's no real parental authority. It is not that the child hears and then rejects his parents' order. There's no parental voice to be heard in the first place. So he doesn't hear his father and mother. His father is in business, his mother's traveling, and he doesn't hear his father's mother. There's nothing to hear. There's nothing to listen to because there's nothing to hear. Okay. Another extremely fascinating detail about his family is hinted in the seemingly redundant wording, voice of his father and voice of his mother. Why doesn't it say his parents' voice? Because the parents are not unified. There's two voices here. The mother has one way of doing things, and the father has another way of doing things. And apparently, they're not the same. So even if he wanted to listen to his parents, he won't know who to listen to. Who do I listen to? You usually take a side. It's extremely important to note that in this regard, that the problem in the marriage faced by the parents of an addict usually predate the manifestation of the addicted child's problem. So when we have a situation in which, and here we're talking about addicted child, but really, like I said before, it's nothing to do with addiction. It has to do with a child who is not behaving in the proper way. So when the child is not behaving the proper way, we have to look at the whole family dynamic, and most importantly, at the parents' marriage. It's almost comical sometimes when I sit in my office and two parents bring a kid so I can talk to him or to her. It's like they read the textbook and now they're acting it out in my office just to test me. But they're serious. They're really serious. And they're having this family fight in front of me. And then they want me to fix the kid. Now, I can see the whole thing playing out right here. The parents are the first ones here who don't get along. I'm not saying that every parent who doesn't get along, their kids become an addict, or any kid who becomes an addict, their parents don't get along. But aside from all the stereotyping, there's a lot of discordance in this family. The second thing on the bottom, the second thing the Torah tells us about the parents' relationship with their son is that though they chastened him, he will not listen to them. There's a saying of the sages, words from the heart enter the heart. It is for this reason that the Hasidic master said that if one rebukes another and the rebuke is rejected, it is the fault of the rebuker. And we talked about it last week. We talked about the diagnoser and the diagnosee. How when we need to identify our character defect, it has to come from someone who is so kind that we can hear them out. Because if it comes from a person who is naturally not kind, then when they will talk to us about our character defects, we won't even be able to hear them. Words that come out of the heart enter the heart. So if they didn't enter the heart, it means it didn't come out of the heart. Which means that if there's a message and someone claims that a person can't hear the message, whose fault is it? Is it the fault of the person who can't hear the message? Or is it the problem of the person who's giving the message? We see this problem in schools. There's this classic way of studying and this classic way of teaching. And if a kid can't understand the way it's taught in the school, he is labeled as a learning disabled. Now, learning disabled means that the method that the teacher is using is not working for this kid. It's impossible, well, it won't make sense unless a child is diagnosed with a real developmental issue. A regular child with learning disability is because the teacher is not speaking in his language. He understands English, and to him, the teacher is talking in Chinese. So the teacher has two ways of fixing it. One of it is saying, this kid has a learning disability, get out of my room. Or he can learn how to speak Chinese. Now that's the moral responsibility of any good teacher, is that if a student does not get what he's saying the first time around, instead of repeating the same thing again and again, is to find a different way of saying it. Until I find the way that fits that specific person. The Talmud says that the reason King Solomon was so smart why is he called that he was the wisest of all people, is because he was capable of finding 3,000 ways of explaining each point that he was trying to make. Every point he was trying to make, he would be able to find 3,000 metaphors to bring it across. So there won't be one person in the whole population that will not be able to connect with his way of understanding. And that shows an extreme wisdom for two reasons. First of all, the obvious one that the Talmud says is because the more a person understands the issue, the more he's capable of explaining it. And when you understand it to 3,000%, then you can explain it to 3,000%. But on a deeper level, the wisdom comes from the fact that he bothered to find 3,000 ways to explain something. Because if not such a wise man, he would explain it, and if you don't get it, you're stupid. But Solomon was so smart, he was so wise that he understood that there isn't such a thing that a person cannot understand. We got to talk his language. So one of the obstacles that we find in parenting is the kid won't listen to me. Well, the kid won't listen to me is maybe a sign that I'm not talking properly. Maybe I think I'm dealing with an adult. Maybe I think I'm dealing with my previous child. Maybe I'm dealing with a child I wish I had. Maybe I'm dealing with the way I wish my parents dealt with me, etc., etc., etc. But then, when it doesn't work, God forbid, well, then the wise thing would be to look at the mirror and see if there's another way of saying it. Unfortunately, we run to the therapist, we run to the rabbi and say, my kid won't listen to me. This is what the Torah says. In other words, the fact that the way to chasten their son has proven effective tell us much more about their style of discipline than it does about the son's behavior. The parents need to learn how to discipline their child in a way that their child understands. Enmeshment. Page 143. Before we go on and talk about the parents tell the elders, let's go talk about the word seize. The parents seize the child. Talk about a classic inability to let go. The parents literally seize their child. They aren't interested in parenting, they want control. What makes this the most absurd, the most obviously dysfunctional, is that one of the many conditions of actually being tried as a stubborn and rebellious son is that the child isn't really a child at all. Like I told you another time, that the parents came to me and told me that their child is giving them trouble, and he's not working, and he's using drugs, and he won't move out of the house. So why would you want your child to move out of the house? He's 43. Well, if he's 43, then maybe treating him as a child becomes part of the problem. In Jewish law, there's no criminal action that can be taken against a minor. So the Torah says this child is an adult. Now, not an adult the way we take adults, which is somebody who is 18 to go to the army and 21 to drink alcohol and to rent a car, whatever it is. But in the Torah, an adult, which means a person who has to take moral responsibility for his actions, is a 13-year-old. Okay? So the stubborn and rebellious son is an adult. And here I'm going back on the bottom of 143, the 7th line from the bottom. Why are his parents taking him to the elders? If the parents really don't know what to do with him, let them kick him out of the house. Does that sound harsh? It's a lot less harsh than what is going to happen after they have their son sentenced and executed based on their testimony. The parents are seizing their child and refusing to let go. They are the ones who turned this whole situation literally into a capital case. The Talmud explains on page 144 that what is meant by the parents' charge that their son is a drunkard and a glutton is that he steals money from them in order to buy food and wine, which he then consumes in bad company. These are not capital crimes. If the parents really want to take legal action against their son, let them turn their son in as a thief to be punished accordingly. The rabbis can even force him to pay back the money. But the parents don't go to the authority to turn in a thief who happens to be their son. They go to the elders and say, this son of ours is stubborn, rebellious, and will not obey our voice. Instead of making a legal claim, they start complaining about their family problems. Moreover, rather than describing their behavior, they assail their son's character, his being. They label him. He's stubborn, rebellious, glutton, drunkard. So what happens here? What happens is that all the things, all the difficult things that a parent may do when his child is behaving in such a way, they're not willing to do. This is one conversation I have with parents all the time when they bring in the 13, 14, 15-year-old kid who is not an addict yet, but is just messing around. I look at them straight in the eyes and say, if you're not willing to do what I'm going to tell you to do now, and really mean it, there's nothing I can do to help you. If your child, no matter what age, ever gets in legal trouble, you shall not bail him out, and you shall not pay for his lawyer. Now, if you're not willing to do this, mean it, follow through with it, and say it to your child in a way that he knows you mean it, you're on your own. Because you're not willing to do the difficult things that it takes to tell a child that if he's going to do things that are illegal, they're on their own. And then they know that once you cover for them for the legal things, you can cover them for their financial thing, and then for their job things, and for the rest of their lives. So, it's not easy for a parent to say that and to mean it. But at the end of the day, this is one of the difficult things that actually help. Now, we have two choices. We can either make the difficult choice now, or eventually we make the difficult choice later. Now, the Torah, we'll see later that we will discuss why this punishment. Why the punishment of death for a kid who is 13 years old and who is not listening to his parents? Seriously? Death? Well, there's three answers to the question why death on page 145. The easy answer, the false answer, is that it's just an hypothetical case. Doesn't answer the question, because just because it's theoretical doesn't make it any less extreme. The classic answer is it's preventive. That if truly now it's not so bad, or if we just let it go the way it is, this kid is not going to be able to steal money from his parents anymore, he's going to steal money from other people, then he's going to become violent, and then he's going to break things, and then he's going to kill people, so his future is already decided, and therefore we kill him now. And then there's Rabbi Taub's answer. And the answer is like this. Page 146. In so many words, parents, you are killing your child. I don't take these words lightly, and neither does anyone who has ever had to actually say those words to another person. Yet, anyone who deals with addiction knows how predictable these things are. Anyone who has seen it a few times already knows how it's going to end. So the Torah says to these hypothetical parents of this hypothetical son in this hypothetical story, Mom and Dad, it's the third time now that you've come to us to complain about your adult son behavior. Things haven't got better since you come here, they've only gotten worse. Here's where it's headed. There's only one way it's going to end, and now we'll show you what it is. When the count concludes, so shall you remove the evil from your midst, and all of Israel shall hear and fear. I don't think it's just talking about the results of executing this hypothetical, stubborn, and rebellious son. I think it's also talking about the positive consequences of our paying attention to the details of this story. I think it is on one level what the Talmud means when it says that the story was given so that we may study and reap reward. If we study the story carefully, we're able to identify and remove the evil from our midst. I don't mean this as an ominous, foreboding way. To the contrary, I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to gain clarity from a hypothetical case instead of real people having to endure actual misery. And so I hope that the study of these verses will help shed light on the dilemma of the addicted family and maybe help some people find the recovery that they need. This is my prayer. So, the author tells us like this. We have to make difficult choices today, because in sometimes later, these difficult things will not be choices anymore. They'll just be there. And the Torah says that it's in the hands of family members and parents. The Torah is not blaming, by the way, the Torah. I skipped the first page so you can go back and read it. The Torah doesn't blame anybody for this, and the Torah doesn't say that it's caused by anybody. The Torah says that when there is a discord and a dysfunction in the family, the first people who need to take action rather than complain are the parents. Just the nature of the thing. We're not going to expect the children to be the ones taking the action. So who has to make the difficult choice? The parent. It is incumbent upon the parent to make the hard, difficult choice. Now, when a parent makes the hard, difficult choice, there's a concept in recovery called raising the bottom. Raising the bottom means that because all of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous come after step one, which is we admitted we're powerless of our addiction, that our life has become unmanageable. And the way step one works is that, first of all, we have to have a life that's unmanageable in order for this step to take place. Number two, we have to realize that the unmanageability of our life is related to our addiction. Okay? That's how step one works. So we have to make a list of all the things in our lives today that are unmanageable. And then we have to see the connection between those things and the way we're indulging in our drug. Only after that, when we realize that our life is unmanageable, can we take steps to live our lives differently. But if we think our lives are manageable, and there's no reason to do all those crazy stuff, moral inventories, and apologizing to making amends, and praying. It's crazy. No one would do that. The only reason we do that is because our life is unmanageable. We don't have a choice. Now, some people's life are manageable. They're using their drug of choice, and their life is still manageable. Eventually, it will become unmanageable. So there's a concept in recovery called raising the bottom, which means making some changes in the way life is right now so that the unmanageability comes a little quicker. So that the recovery comes a little quicker before it becomes irreversible. And that's the thinking behind all these interventions that we do, which is once we remove the enabling, we are creating a situation of unmanageability. Because technically their life is unmanageable already now. The reason it's not is because of all the people they're using around in their lives. So by taking away the enabling, we're making their lives unmanageable today, and through that we're raising their bottom. And that is a little bit what the Torah says over here. The Torah says, take the necessary steps to help the addict around you hit bottom a little quicker. Sometimes those choices are going to be difficult for you. Telling your friend you're not going to talk to them again, telling your child they can't live in your house anymore, cutting them off financially, taking their cars away, whatever it is. And sometimes, when we cut the help, the results are not positive either. But at the end of the day, by making those difficult choices, we are inducing a bottom, an unmanageability that is the key to recovery, which is what we're going to discuss in part 6 of this book, next week's chapter, which is hitting bottom and surrender, and how that brings to acceptance and recovery. Thank you.